Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And folks, welcome back into the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network Team Autopsy Report. Folks, we got the Texas Longhorns, newcomer to the Southeastern Conference, on the autopsy table. And as my board gets set up here for me, I'm going to run through this team in some really good detail. And I'm going to try to keep this to like the old Domino's commercial. I'm going to try to keep this to about 32 minutes here. Let's start with the head coach, Steve Sarkisian. We know this is his third stop as a collegiate head coach. 5 years with the Washington Huskies, 2 years there at Southern Cal, and then 4 years now at the University of Texas. We're just going to focus in on those years at the University of Texas because that's where he has been most recently, and we have some quality information now because there was a 6-year gap from the time where he was let go at USC to becoming the head coach there at Texas. So just looking at his record at the University of Texas in 4 years, 38 wins, 17 losses, 6.91 win percentage there, folks. So basically almost 7 out of every 10 games that he's been the coach there for the University of Texas, they've been doing some winning there. Back-to-back college football playoff appearances. This team is absolutely loaded from a talent standpoint. Let's take a look at what we saw in 2024, and does that foreshadow anything for us in 2025? Okay, let's start, as always, Thank you for joining us, whether you're watching this on YouTube, streaming this on our Twitter feed at Crunchtime VIP, or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Want to say thank you as always. And if you're listening on the podcast platform, don't worry. Anything that I reference on the screen here for our YouTube and Twitter viewers, don't worry. I got you covered here. As we always start with the season betting win total. The Longhorns had a season win total back in June of 10.5. They were able to get you to the pay window if you took that over because they finished the regular season 11-1. We know that one loss coming against the University of Georgia in the regular season. When we look at our in-season composite win total, three very unique but very highly predictive results from a win-loss percentage there. We had the Longhorns at a 9.8. So we'll see if we can't circle that game for you that the Longhorns were able to win, that our numbers set probably could have come up a little bit short there. Now, let's dive deep into the schedule, and this is something that we're going to do quite often here. We're going to look at your team from a strength of schedule and a strength of record standpoint. And when we look at that strength of schedule number, basically you only control about 25% of your schedule as far as who is on there and who isn't. And that's your non-conference schedule. Your in-conference schedule is a pure luck of the draw. There's no preset, let's try to stack this team to get a bunch of easy wins in conference. That's just not how it's set up, folks. Okay, so Texas, 5.525. That was the 19th toughest schedule in college football last year. As far as their strength of record, this you have zero control over. It's basically how well did your opponents do during their regular season last year. And for Texas, 0.521, it was the 71st rated strength of schedule out of 135 teams last year. When I get into those numbers, you're going to see their opponents' power rankings were higher than what their win-loss record was. And then from an overall rankings, the Longhorns were our number 2 ranked team last year. Same can be said in our College Football Playoff Committee rankings, and their power rankings were 3rd best in college football last year. All right, so, and as we pull it up here on the screen here, let's go through the Longhorns' opponent's schedule. Colorado State was 8-4. Michigan, a disappointing 7-5 last year. Had a little bit higher expectations for them. UTSA, the Road Runners, were 6-6. Louisiana Monroe, 5-7. Now we get into conference play here. Mississippi State was 2-10. Oklahoma was 6-6. Georgia was 10-2. We talked about that being their loss there in Austin. Vanderbilt 6-6. The Gators were 7-5. Arkansas was 6-6. Kentucky was 4-8. And then finally, Texas A&M was 8-4. I said I wanted to see if I could find a game that they won that they should have lost, potentially, or could have lost. It was the game against Vanderbilt, winning that game 27-24. We saw Vanderbilt last year pull off a few upsets last year. This was one that the Commodores let slip through their fingers and wasn't able to pull off that upset. So had that game gone the other way, I don't know if we get Texas in the college football playoffs because that strength of schedule, it was light. And certainly the strength of record was light. Now, let's take a look at the quality of defenses from a pure power ranking standpoint that the Texas Longhorns faced last year. We'll use that baseline number of 68. Colorado State did not qualify for that. So Michigan was 21st in defense last year. Oklahoma was 8th. Georgia was 5th. Vanderbilt, 32nd best power ranked defense for us last year. The Gators were 17th. Arkansas, 44th. Kentucky, 13th. And then finally, A&M was 30th. So 8 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. However, 3 of their opponents were outside of the top 90. You're talking about an average power ranking of 47. That's a team that's probably 7-5, maybe even 6-6 there on the season, just looking at it from a pure power ranking standpoint, just kind of visualizing that. Now, let's dive into the offensive numbers. And for the offense, I'm going to give you 3 numbers here. And then for the defense, I'm just going to give you the 2. For the offense, I'm going to give you the NCAA average. Texas category data, what we'll call the accounting stats, and then what our number is when we adjust for opponents. So last year, average team scored about 28 points per game. The Longhorns were at 33.6. However, when we adjust for opponent, that goes up to 38.8 points per game. So a 5-point per game improvement there when we adjust for opponent. Passing yardage per game. Average team last year was at 227 passing yards per game. Longhorns 281. When we adjust for opponent, just a slight regression down to 277 passing yards per game. So about 4 yards less there. So no major adjustment there for opponent. Average team ran the ball for 160 yards per game last year. Texas, 164. However, when we adjust that for opponents, the Longhorns were at 197 yards per game, 33-yard improvement. So the quality of their rush defenses, this team actually performed quite well there when we look at that adjusted number. And as far as total offense per game, 387 yards per game was the average. Texas was at 445. When we adjust for opponent, goes up to 474 yards per game. So this offense was a little bit better than even what their statistical numbers will show you. Now, when we dive deep into these numbers here, average team finished the drive with either a touchdown or field goal about 40% of the time last year. Texas, 53%. Literally 1 out of every 2 times they had the ball, they were getting either a touchdown or field goal. Phenomenal job there. As far as drives ending with a touchdown, this is a number that I always love to highlight. 29% was the average last year. The Longhorns blew that out of the water, 47%. And then third down conversions, average team last year was at 39%. The Longhorns at 46%. Offense was absolutely phenomenal. Now, here's what I didn't like about the Longhorn offense last year. And this is despite having 2 offensive tackles get drafted early on in the NFL draft. Texas gave up 37 sacks during the regular season in the games that we tracked. Average team would have been about 24. So with bookend tackles, one that went in the top 10 and Kevin Banks Jr. there to the Saints. Wow, that's a lot there. Then they committed 19 turnovers. That too also a little problematic for me. Now, one more deep dive into their offensive metrics here before we flip it over to the defense. Your 3 E's, as we like to call it. How effective, explosive, and efficient was your offense last year? Texas, number 6 in efficiency and effectiveness, and 12th in explosiveness. When we look at this team from an overall offensive standpoint, the Longhorns were our number 6 rated offense in college football last year. If you want to bullet point this offense, they were both balanced and efficient all the way around, and the numbers that I just kind of walked my way through will absolutely explain that. Going to spend a quick moment here on the quarterback. Quinn Ewers, we know he was a day 3 pick there for the Miami Dolphins. The decision not to come back to college and potentially transfer somewhere else, we'll see if that works out in Quinn's favor. But last year, in 14 games, Quinn Ewers completed a tick below 66% of his passes, 3,472 yards, 31 touchdowns, but 12 INTs. 7% of his pass attempts were touchdowns, but here's what I don't like from a quarterbacking standpoint, especially somebody that's played this much football. 2.7% of his pass attempts were intercepted. 7.8 yards per play per pass attempt. That is extremely low when you look at the defenses that they went up against and the quality of wide receivers that they have. You're talking about Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, both in the NFL. Same with their tight end, Gunnar Helm, Jaden Blue, NFL. This passing game down the field should have been much better from a yards per attempt number. I'm going to spend one quick moment here because he was a first-round pick, and I had questions about where he went. Matthew Golden. We know at the combine he ran what was reported a 4.29. When I go back and I look at his numbers from Texas last year, I'm going to have some major questions here. 58 receptions, 987 yards, 17 yards per reception, 9 touchdowns. When I hear 4.29, I'm thinking of, especially in college, somebody should probably be around that 18.5 to 19 yards per reception because you're not getting a lot of volume, but what you're doing is when you're getting those receptions, you're making big time chunk plays. 17 yards per game is solid, but it's not electric. That's where I had the issue at with that selection by Green Bay. We'll see how that pans out. Absolutely could be wrong on that. Let's flip it over to the defense. And again, we'll use that baseline number of 68. How many of Texas opponents' offenses were ranked inside of that top 68? It's not until their fourth game against Mississippi State when they their fifth game, against Mississippi State where they found an opponent inside of that top 68. Mississippi State was 39th, Oklahoma 62nd, Georgia 12th, Vanderbilt 51st, the Gators 25th, Arkansas 35th, and then finally Texas A&M 22nd. Only 7 out of their 12 regular season opponents were inside of that top 68. And then you're looking at 3 of their opponents either 80th or worse. You're talking about an average power ranking of 58. You're now looking at a opposing offense that would have probably been on a 6-6 team. Best case scenario, 7-5. Texas defense did not face the high caliber of opponents last year. We'll see how that affects their numbers here. Now, Texas gave up 12.5 points per game. When we adjust that for opponent, it's actually a little bit better, just 11 points per game. Their pass defense, 143 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, actually goes down to 132 yards per game. So this pass defense was absolutely elite. Their rush defense, it's been good for a couple of years now, and last year was no exception. 106 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, just goes up slightly to 110. This defense, from a total offense allowed standpoint, 250 yards per game. That is 120 yards better than the NCAA average. When we adjust for opponent, still sitting at 242. Now, with those eye-popping numbers, you can expect their advanced numbers to be extremely good. Their opponent's drive ending with a score 17% of the time, over 22% percentage points better than the average team last year. 9.5% of their opponent's drives ended with a touchdown. That's eye-popping. And then third down defense, this defense knows how to get off the field last year on third downs. Opponents converted 26% on third downs. Again, almost 13 percentage points better than the average team last year. And this defense absolutely knew how to get after quarterbacks. 46 sacks last year, almost double what the average team would have gotten last year. Their fourth down defense, not bad. 35 attempts by their opponents, 18 conversions, 51%. That's about 2 percentage points better than the average team last year. And this defense was a turnover magnet, forced 26 turnovers last year. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what their 3 E's were in defense. 1, 1, 2. The 2 was inefficiency. The Texas Longhorns were our number 1 overall ranked defense in college football last year. Absolutely no surprise on that. Bullet pointing their defense, quite simply the best defensive unit in college football. When I look at their special teams unit, I'm going to say solid, just not elite. 16 for 25 on field goal conversions, 64%, well below the average there. Did convert their extra points, and a lot of them. Averaged 4 punts per game last year for an average of 44.4. So the punt game was actually pretty good there, coming in ranked 26th in that category. So field goal kicking, a little bit problematic there. Now, let's take a look at the coaching standpoint. Oh, yes, +7 turnover differential. Penalties and penalty yards per game, exactly right on the average. 6 penalties per game, 50 yards worth of penalties. So they weren't beating themselves from a penalty standpoint. In one-score games last year, Coach Sark, 2-1, 67 win percentage. Here's where Texas absolutely made their bones last year against quality opponents. 8 games last year, 7 wins, 1 loss, 88% against quality opponents. That's how you make the college football playoffs, and that's how you make a deep, deep run in the college football playoffs. Now, offensive-minded head coach, former quarterback there at BYU, you would expect him to be a little bit more aggressive on 4th downs. 15.6% is what his attempt rate was as far as going for it on 4th down. That was 44th out of 144 qualifying head coaches last year in Division I football. And their conversion rate, 31 attempts, 17 conversions, 55%. That's about a tick better than the average at 53% there. Now, let's take a look at the offensive and defensive splits in their wins versus losses. We're going to start right there with the offense. In the 13 wins, and this will include the playoffs, and the SEC championship game, I should also include that. This offense was generating 37 points per game in those 13 victories, 276 yards per game passing on 31 attempts. Keep that number in mind. Circle that passing attempts per game, 31. 8.8 yards per passing attempt, 12.9 yards per completion. This is right where you want to be in the sweet spot as far as that yards per passing attempt and yards per completion. If you're over 8.5 yards per completion, over 12.5 yards per, 8.8 yards per attempt and 12.5 yards per completion, that's really elite level college football from a passing standpoint. The run game, 39 rushing attempts per game for 186 yards per game, 4.8 yards per rushing attempt. This team was running about 70 plays per game for 462 yards per game in total offense, 6.6 yards per play. The 3rd down conversion rate was 48% on 3rd downs, 67% on 4th downs. In 13 wins, the Longhorns only committed 15 turnovers. Impressive, right? In their 3 losses, and that will include the regular season loss to Georgia, the SEC title game loss to Georgia, and then, of course, in the college football playoff, 16 points per game. And their passing attempts go up to 45 pass attempts per game for 290 yards per game passing. 6.5 yards per attempt. And 11.2 yards per completion. Their run game, now this is where it gets really problematic. 10 fewer rushing attempts per game. Actually, we could round it up to 11. 28 rushing attempts per game. Folks, 39 yards per game rushing. That's correct. 1.4 yards per rushing attempt. 73 offensive plays per game for only 330 yards in total offense. 4.5 yards per play. And the turnovers go up quite significantly as well. Now, in the regular season, 4 turnovers in those losses. When you look at what they did in the SEC title game and the college football playoff game, that number balloons up. They average 3 turnovers per game in those losses. Now, let's take a look at the defensive splits here before we get to the final grade and the final verdict. 13 wins, 12.7 points per game, 168 yards passing allowed on 30 attempts, 5.7 yards per pass attempt, 9.7 yards per completion. Like I said, their pass defense was absolutely elite. Run game was elite. 35 rushing attempts by their opponents, only 110 yards per game is what they allowed. 3.2 yards per rushing attempt, 277 yards of total offense, 4.3 yards per play. That is just phenomenal defense there. 27% is what their opponents converted on third downs and did generate 23 turnovers there in the regular season. Now, in their 3 losses, and like I said, again, this includes the SEC title game and the college football playoffs, 27 points per game is what they allowed. 200 yards passing on 35 attempts. Again, lights out. Secondary play, 5.8 yards per attempt, 9 yards per completion. The rush defense was still phenomenal. 30 rushing attempts, 110 yards per game allowed, 3.6 yards per rushing attempt. Their opponents, 310 yards per game in total offense, 4.8 yards per play. Their opponents converting in those losses, 35% on third downs. In Texas, now in the regular season, forced 3 turnovers, but when you look at their turnovers per game in those 3 losses, 2 forced turnovers per game. So that, to me, is where things really stand out. It was more so an issue with the offense for me in their losses. So let's go ahead and get to the final grade, and then we'll get to the final verdict for the Texas Longhorns and what they need to fix in 2025. The Texas Longhorns will get a final grade of a solid A. What did we like about this team last year? No doubt about it. Best defense in college football. Very balanced and very explosive on offense. We talked about the plus turnover margin there for the Longhorns. What was not to like? 4th down struggles at times on defense, some inconsistencies from the passing game in those losses, and sometimes the red zone execution wasn't as pristine as it needed to be. So in our final moments, the final verdict here, Texas was an elite team on both sides of the ball. Their defense ranked number 1 in a lot of our statistical categories. As I mentioned, their offense was both explosive and balanced. Their one loss in the regular season notwithstanding as they were completely dominated there at home against the University of Georgia. And once again, losing a rematch in the SEC title game to Georgia. So failing to win that conference title in their first season in the Southeastern Conference. The Longhorns displayed a balanced offense with a power running game and an effective passing game, while our defense took another step forward as being one of the elite stop units in all of college football. We've already talked about their struggles there when they really stepped up in weight class. Back-to-back losses to the University of Georgia is something that they'll want to get rectified here in 2025. Steve Starr's Keystone squad is headed in the right direction, but to truly compete for a national championship, Texas must establish itself as a consistent force when that schedule in SEC play stiffens up a little bit. Whether that comes in 2025 or not will remain to be seen. So what are the three keys for the University of Texas in 2025? We'll briefly mention the kid's name here as we get to the 30 plus minute mark here. Quinn Ewers gone. Arch Manning takes over as the quarterback. In 10 games last year, 68% completion percentage, 939 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, 2 INTs. A lot of that against mediocre teams, so nothing to take away from that whatsoever. So here are the three keys for the Longhorns in 2025. Continue to improve on the late game execution. We saw it was good, but it absolutely bit them in their one regular season loss against the University of Georgia. So being able to close out late games against those elite level teams will be something that Texas wants to take care of in 2025. Continue to dominate the trenches. We talked about how great that defensive line was. The same cannot be said for the offensive line. Losing both of your bookend tackles is absolutely paramount. Must get that rectified here once we head into fall camp there. Know who your starting left tackle and right tackle are going to be, and they need to be good day one out of the gate because of that big-time matchup they have in week 1 in the 2025 college football season. And key number 3, as good as they were on defense last year, you want to see this unit continue to take away the ball as much as possible, create those turnovers, force more punts, get the ball back to your first-time starting quarterback in a true sense of the word in Arch Manning. You want to give him as many short fields as possible. If the Texas Longhorns focus on these 3 areas, Texas can not only position themselves to compete for another SEC title, but a legitimate chance to win a national championship in 2025.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.